Have you ever been made to feel like a criminal in your own neighborhood just because of the color of your skin? Comment below if you've experienced or witnessed this kind of racial profiling that happens every day across America. The sun was setting behind the perfectly manicured hedges of Oak Ridge Estates when I saw it happen, a scene that would become the talk of our community for months to come and forever change the way our neighborhood functioned. Jamal Thompson, 15 years old, with a bright smile and an even brighter future, was walking home from his study group at the community library. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, his hoodie pulled up against the evening chill, his head bobbing slightly to whatever was playing through his earbuds. Just a normal teenager, heading home after a productive evening, spent preparing for his advanced placement exams. Jamal was the kind of kid parents bragged about. Straight A student, junior varsity basketball player, volunteer at the local animal shelter on weekends. But not to Karen Whitfield. To the president of our homeowners association, Jamal was an intruder, a threat, a problem that needed to be handled immediately before the safety of our precious gated community was compromised. I watched from my front porch as Karen's white Tesla slowed to a crawl beside Jamal. She rolled down her window, her perfectly highlighted bob catching the golden hour light. From where I stood, I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language told the story: pointing finger, stern face, the universal posture of unwarranted authority being exercised with smug satisfaction. Jamal stopped walking. He removed his earbuds and stood perfectly still, his shoulders visibly tensing. Even from a distance, I could see the change in his demeanor, the immediate switch from relaxed teenager to cautious young black man being confronted. It was a transformation no 15-year-old should ever have to master, yet one that too many black children learn as a survival skill. This wasn't the first time Karen had patrolled our neighborhood. Her white Tesla was a common sight, cruising slowly past homes, noting violations of HOA rules with almost gleeful efficiency. 2 inches of grass too tall. You'd find a notice on your door. Holiday decorations up a day past the allowed period. Expect an email with a reminder and a veiled threat about fines. But it was the first time I'd seen her actually stop someone. "Excuse me, young man." Karen's voice carried across the quiet street as she stepped out of her car, designer purse clutched tightly under her arm, like she was in downtown instead of our sleepy suburb. "Do you have a reason to be in this neighborhood?" Jamal's reply was too quiet for me to hear, but I saw him gesture toward the row of houses just beyond the community park, where several new families had moved in recently. "I'm going to need more than that," Karen continued, her voice growing louder with each word, as if volume could increase her authority. "This is a private community. I don't recognize you, and I know everyone who lives here." I put down my coffee mug and started walking toward them. Something didn't feel right, and years of nursing had taught me to trust my instincts when a situation was turning dangerous. By the time I got within earshot, Karen had her phone out, manicured finger hovering threateningly over the screen. "I live here," Jamal was saying, his voice steady but strained with the practiced patience of someone who's had to explain himself before. "My family moved in 3 months ago on Maple Court, number 1542, the blue house with the basketball hoop in the driveway." "No, you don't." Karen's denial was immediate, confident, and dripping with condescension. "I know everyone who lives in this community, especially on Maple Court. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." "Ma'am, I'm just trying to go home," Jamal insisted, his voice cracking slightly on the word home. "Please, just let me walk to my house. You can follow me there if you want to verify. This isn't up for debate." Karen raised her phone higher, like a weapon. "I'm calling the police." That's when Jamal pulled out his own phone, smart kid. He'd clearly been prepared for this kind of situation, a fact that made my heart ache with its implications. "I'm recording this," he said calmly, activating his camera, "and I'm calling my father." Karen laughed, a short, dismissive sound that managed to convey both amusement and threat. "Go ahead, call whoever you want. Meanwhile, I'm calling 911 because there's a suspicious person refusing to leave private property." I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Karen," I called out, approaching them with purposeful strides. "What's going on here?" She turned to me, momentary relief washing over her face at seeing another white resident. The look she gave me held an assumption of allyship that made my stomach turn. "Sarah, thank goodness. This young man is trespassing, and he won't leave. I've asked him nicely, but he keeps insisting he lives here. Can you believe it? I'm not trespassing, Jamal insisted, his voice still remarkably composed for a teenager being accused of a crime in his own community. I live here with my parents. We moved in 3 months ago, the blue house on Maple Court. Karen turned to me, eyebrows raised in theatrical disbelief. Have you ever seen him before? Does he look familiar to you at all? I hesitated. Truthfully, I hadn't. Our community was large, with over 200 homes spread across several streets, and I worked long hours as a nurse at County General, often taking night shifts that left me sleeping during the day when most neighbors were active. But what I did know was that Karen's behavior was wrong fundamentally, unquestionably wrong. Karen, does it matter if I've seen him? I replied, crossing my arms. He says he lives here. He's given you his exact address. Why don't we? I'm calling the police, she interrupted, already dialing with a thumb that seemed practiced at making complaint calls. This has gone on long enough. We can't be too careful these days. Jamal's phone was ringing too. He had it on speaker, his calm facade beginning to show tiny cracks around the edges as he waited for an answer. Dad. His voice finally betrayed his youth and fear when the call connected. Can you come home? I'm being stopped from walking to our house by a lady saying I don't live here. She's calling the police on me. I couldn't hear the response, but Jamal's next words made my heart sink with their practiced precision. I'm on an Oak Ridge Drive, near the park. Yes, I'm recording everything. She's calling 911 right now. No, I haven't moved from where she stopped me. Yes, sir. I know, hands visible, voice calm. The rehearsed nature of his responses told an entire story, a story of conversations no parent should have to have with their child. Yet, conversations Black parents across America have every day. Stay calm, keep your hands where they can be seen, don't make sudden movements, record everything. By this point, a few more neighbors had emerged from their homes, curious about the commotion. Karen stood with her back straighter, phone to her ear, as if performing for her growing audience the self-appointed defender of our exclusive community. Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person in Oak Ridge Estates. She spoke into her phone with the kind of exaggerated articulation people use when they want to be taken very seriously. Young black male, wearing a hoodie, refusing to leave when asked. No, he's not armed that I can see, but he's being confrontational. Yes, near the entrance to Oak Ridge Drive and the community park. I'm the HOA president here. Yes, I'll stay on the line. More neighbors were gathering now. Mrs. Chen from 3 doors down, her gardening gloves still on her hands. The Lopez family from across the street, their dinner apparently interrupted. Even old Mr. Peterson had hobbled out with his cane to see what was happening, his ancient beagle trailing behind him. Karen, this is ridiculous, I said more firmly, stepping closer to Jamal in what I hoped was a gesture of solidarity. You can't just stop people because you don't recognize them. I'm the HOA president, she snapped back, covering her phone's microphone momentarily. It's my responsibility to keep this community safe. We've had break-ins in the area, from teenagers walking home. I challenged, making no effort to hide my disgust. Jamal stood perfectly still through all of this, his phone recording steadily in one hand, the other still on the call with his father. His expression was a mask of forced calm, but his eyes held a sea of emotions no 15-year-old should have to contain: fear, anger, humiliation, resignation, all simmering beneath a surface of remarkable self-control. 10 minutes, 10 agonizing minutes, passed before the first police cruiser arrived. Karen straightened her designer blazer, prepared to meet the officers with the confidence of someone who has never had reason to fear law enforcement. But it was what happened next that no one expected, least of all Karen Whitfield, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog. As the first officer stepped out of his vehicle, another police car pulled up. This one wasn't a regular patrol unit. It was a supervisor's vehicle, with distinct markings and antenna. The man who emerged wore not just a uniform, but the insignia of a captain. Tall and imposing, with the same warm brown skin as Jamal, Captain David Thompson surveyed the scene with a practiced eye before making direct eye contact with his son. Jamal, he called out, his voice deep and authoritative, in a way that commanded immediate attention from everyone present. You okay, son? Karen's head whipped around so fast I worried she'd hurt herself. Her mouth fell open, then closed, then opened again, like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. The color drained from her face so quickly that, for a moment, I was concerned I might need to use my nursing skills if she fainted. "Dad." Jamal's composure finally cracked a bit, relief evident in the slight tremor of his voice. "I was just walking home from study group." Captain Thompson nodded, his expression revealing nothing as he approached. He placed a reassuring hand briefly on Jamal's shoulder before turning his attention to Karen, who had gone completely still, her phone clutched so tightly in her hand that her knuckles had turned white against her already pale skin. "Ma'am," he said, his tone professionally neutral despite what must have been a storm of parental fury beneath the surface. "I understand you called the police about a suspicious person in your neighborhood." Karen's face had transformed from its usual confident mask to a portrait of dawning horror. "There's been a misunderstanding," she stammered, each word seeming to catch in her throat. We have protocols. This is a private community, and I'm Captain David Thompson," he interrupted her smoothly, his badge catching the last rays of sunset. "I believe you've met my son Jamal. We moved into 1542 Maple Court approximately 3 months ago, the blue house with the basketball hoop." The patrol officer who had arrived first approached, recognition dawning on his face as he saw Captain Thompson. "Captain," he nodded respectfully, "I didn't realize this was your residence." "It is," Captain Thompson confirmed, his tone remaining measured and professional. "My son was walking home from his study group at the community library when he was stopped and questioned by this lady, who then proceeded to call 911 to report him as suspicious." He gestured toward Karen, who seemed to be shrinking with each word, her previous self-importance deflating visibly. "Dad, I recorded everything," Jamal said, holding up his phone, "from the moment she stopped me." Captain Thompson nodded. "That was smart, son." He turned back to Karen, who had finally found her voice again, though it emerged higher and less certain than before. "Captain," she began, fighting to regain her composure with visible effort, "as the president of the Oak Ridge Estates, HOA, it's my duty to ensure that only residents and authorized guests are in our community. I've never seen your son before, and he couldn't properly identify himself." "Couldn't identify himself?" I interjected, unable to contain my disbelief. "He told you exactly where he lived. He offered to let you follow him home to verify. What more identification did you need?" Karen shot me a venomous look. "Sarah, please stay out of this. This is an HOA matter." "This is a profiling matter," I shot back. "And as a resident and HOA member, I have every right to voice my concern about how you're treating another resident." "I have to agree with the lady here," Captain Thompson said, nodding toward me. "My son gave you his address. He explained he lived here, yet you chose not to believe him and called 911. I'm curious what specifically made you suspicious of my 15-year-old son." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the evening cicadas seemed to pause their chorus to hear what Karen would say. Karen fumbled for words. Her usual eloquence abandoned her. "I didn't recognize we've had break-ins recently." "And no, we haven't," a voice called out from the growing crowd of neighbors. It was Mr. Peterson, our community's oldest resident, who had lived in Oak Ridge Estates since it was built. Not a single one in over a year. "Well, in neighboring areas then," Karen amended quickly, "and he was wearing a hoodie and—" "A hoodie," Captain Thompson repeated, his eyebrow raising slightly, "in 60 weather at sunset." "That seems reasonable to me," the crowd murmured in agreement. Karen's justifications were crumbling faster than she could rebuild them. Captain Thompson nodded his thanks to Mr. Peterson before turning back to Karen. "So I'll ask again, what made you suspicious of my son?" Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted around, looking for an ally, for someone to step in and validate her actions. She found no one. "It's because he's black," someone in the crowd said plainly. It was Mrs. Lopez, her accent thick but her words crystal clear. The blunt statement hung in the air like smoke. No one contradicted it because no one could. Captain Thompson took a deep breath, his professional demeanor never wavering, despite what must have been a hurricane of emotions beneath the surface. "Officer Davis," he addressed the patrol officer who had arrived first, "would you please take statements from my son and any witnesses? I'd like a full report of this incident." "Yes, sir," Officer Davis replied, already pulling out his notepad. "Wait, a report?" Karen's voice rose an octave. "That's completely unnecessary. This was just a misunderstanding. I was doing my job as HOA president. A misunderstanding that resulted in a 911 call about my son Captain Thompson replied evenly. And I suspect it's not the first time you've had such a misunderstanding with residents of color in this community. As if on cue, the Lopez family stepped forward from the gathering crowd. She questioned our teenage daughter last month. Mr. Lopez said, his arm protectively around his wife's shoulders, asked if she was someone's maid when she was just getting our mail. Our daughter was in tears. Miss S. Chen nodded vigorously from where she stood, and she followed my brother around when he was visiting me until I came outside and told her to stop. Called him suspicious too. More murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, red blotches appearing on her neck and cheeks. Those were different situations, she protested, her voice shrill now. There were legitimate concerns in those cases. Were there? Captain Thompson asked quietly, the question hanging in the air like a judge's gavel about to fall. More neighbors were coming forward now, sharing similar stories. The Patels had been questioned about cooking smells. The Johnsons' black friends had been asked to provide ID at the community pool. It seemed Karen had appointed herself the unofficial gatekeeper of Oak Ridge Estates, particularly vigilant about people of color who dared to exist within its boundaries. The stories spilled out one after another, like a dam had broken. Years of small indignities and misunderstandings that had never been connected before were suddenly being laid bare in the fading evening light. I think we need to call an emergency HOA meeting, someone suggested from the back of the crowd. Agreed. Several voices echoed immediately. Karen was cornered, and she knew it. But like many people with unearned authority suddenly challenged, she doubled down. You can call whatever meeting you want, she snapped, attempting to reassert her dominance with a toss of her highlighted bob. But as president, I set the agenda, and I decide what matters are discussed. This incident doesn't qualify for emergency status under our bylaws. Actually, an older gentleman stepped forward, introducing himself as Harold Wright, as the HOA treasurer for the past 5 years. I can confirm that our bylaws allow for emergency meetings called by a petition of just 20% of homeowners, and it looks like we've got at least that many right here. He gestured to the growing crowd that now numbered at least 50 residents. Karen's confident facade finally cracked. For the first time since I'd known her, through countless HOA meetings where she ruled with an iron fist cloaked in passive-aggressive politeness, she looked afraid. This is ridiculous, she sputtered, her designer purse clutched to her chest like armor. All I did was try to protect our community. That's what you all elected me to do. No, Captain Thompson said firmly. You profiled my son because of his race, refused to believe him when he told you he lived here, and called the police on him for the crime of walking home. That's not protection. That's harassment. Officer Davis had been taking notes throughout all of this, his pen moving rapidly across his notepad. Captain, would you like to file a formal complaint? This could potentially be classified as a false police report, misuse of emergency services, or even a hate incident. Before Captain Thompson could answer, Jamal spoke up. Dad, can I say something? His father nodded, stepping back slightly to give his son the floor. The crowd quieted as Jamal turned to face Karen directly, his composure regained. He stood straight, shoulders back, speaking with a clarity and purpose that belied his 15 years. Miss S. Whitfield, I understand you think you were protecting your community, but this community is my home too. Every time I leave the house, my parents worry about me in ways that parents of white kids don't have to. My dad is a police captain, and even he had to teach me what to do if I'm ever stopped by the police or accused of something I didn't do, like today. He paused, looking around at the gathered neighbors before continuing. I didn't do anything wrong today, except exist in a space you didn't think I belonged in. And the sad thing is, I knew exactly what to do when you stopped me. I didn't argue. I stayed calm. I recorded everything. I called my dad because we've had this conversation in my house many times. The crowd had gone completely silent, hanging on every word from this remarkably composed young man. Several people were wiping away tears. I don't want you to lose your position or get in trouble, Jamal continued, showing a grace that many adults in the crowd clearly found humbling. What I want is for everyone to think before you make assumptions about people based on how they look, because next time, it might not be a police captain's son who gets profiled. It might be someone who doesn't know their rights, or someone who doesn't stay calm, or someone who doesn't have a phone to record what's happening. And then what? What happens to them? His words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity and truth. I want to live in a community where nobody has to prove they belong, Jamal finished quietly. Don't you want that too? Captain Thompson placed a hand on his son's shoulder, unmistakable pride in his eyes despite the circumstances that had led to this moment. I think my son has made his position clear, he said. Instead of filing a formal complaint today, I'd like to see this community address its issues directly. I understand there will be an emergency HOA meeting. I look forward to attending and discussing concrete steps to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Karen, defeated and exposed, could only nod stiffly, her usual torrent of words apparently exhausted. As the crowd began to disperse, with many neighbors approaching Jamal and his father to express their support and apologize for what had happened, I made my way over to them as well. I'm Sarah, I introduced myself. I live just down the street. I'm so sorry this happened. Captain Thompson shook my hand firmly. Thank you for speaking up. Too often, people stay silent in these situations. I wish I'd done more, I admitted, the guilt of my initial hesitation still gnawing at me. You did something, Jamal said, wisdom beyond his years in his tired eyes. That matters. The emergency HOA meeting was held 3 days later in our community center. The turnout was unprecedented. Nearly every household was represented. The room filled beyond capacity with folding chairs hastily brought in from storage. Karen arrived late, sliding into a back seat as Harold called the meeting to order. The agenda was simple, addressing racial profiling within our community and reviewing HOA leadership. Captain Thompson spoke, not as a police officer, but as a resident and father. He shared statistics about racial profiling, explained the psychological impact it has on those who experience it, and proposed concrete steps our community could take to become more inclusive and welcoming. My son shouldn't need a strategy for walking home, he said at one point, his voice thick with emotion barely held in check. None of our children should. Jamal also spoke, showing maturity beyond his years as he recounted his experience without anger or resentment, focusing instead on how we could do better as a community. I don't want this to be about punishing anyone, he said, glancing briefly toward Karen in the back row. I want it to be about making sure everyone feels welcome and safe here. Everyone. Other residents shared their experiences too. The Patel spoke about feeling unwelcome since moving in. Miss S. Lopez described her daughter's lingering anxiety about checking the mail. Mr. Jackson, a black resident who had lived in the community for 5 years, admitted he still felt the need to wear Oak Ridge Estates branded clothing when walking his dog, just so people know I belong here. When the time came to vote, it was almost unanimous. Karen was removed from her position as HOA president, and a new board was elected with diversity as a priority. Captain Thompson was asked to serve as security consultant for the community, a role he accepted with the condition that the HOA also establish a welcoming committee for new residents and regular community events to help neighbors actually get to know one another. Security isn't just about keeping perceived threats out, he explained. It's about building a community where everyone feels they belong. The most powerful moment came at the end of the meeting, when Karen, who had remained silent throughout, approached Jamal and his father. The room hushed as she made her way to the front, every eye following her progress. I owe you both an apology, she said, her voice barely audible at first before she seemed to find her resolve and spoke more clearly. I've done a lot of reflecting these past few days, and I realize now that I've been wrong. Not just with you, but with others too. She turned to face the room at large. I never thought of myself as racist, she continued, her voice wavering slightly. I have black friends. I voted for Obama. I thought that meant I couldn't be part of the problem. But my actions, they spoke differently. She turned back to Jamal. You showed more maturity and grace than I did, and I'm sorry for how I treated you. I can't take it back, but I can promise to do better. Jamal nodded, accepting her apology with more grace than many adults would have shown. We all have work to do, Captain Thompson replied, extending his hand to her. The important thing is that you're willing to do it now. As they shook hands, I couldn't help but feel that something important had shifted in our community that day. We'd been forced to confront an ugly truth, that racism doesn't always announce itself with slurs and violence. Sometimes it hides in concerns about safety, in just asking questions, in refusing to believe someone belongs. 6 months later, Oak Ridge Estates is a different place. We have regular community gatherings where neighbors actually get to know each other. New residents are welcomed with visits, and gift baskets. The kids in the neighborhood, of all races, play together at the park where Jamal was once stopped for the crime of walking while black. The new HOA board, led by Harold Wright and including representatives from various backgrounds, has revised many of the old restrictive policies that Karen had enforced with such zeal. The community pool no longer requires ID checks. Residents get an electronic key fob instead. Noise complaints are handled with direct conversation first, not immediate fines. Cultural events and holidays from various traditions are celebrated in the community center. And Karen, she's changed too. She's not the same woman who called the police on a black teenager for walking in his own neighborhood. She's taken the time to educate herself, to listen, to grow. She volunteers now with a community outreach program that Captain Thompson helped establish, connecting law enforcement with neighborhoods to build trust and understanding. I saw her last week at the neighborhood barbecue, helping Jamal and his basketball teammates set up for a fundraiser. The awkwardness between them has faded, replaced by something not quite friendship but definitely respect. Change isn't always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's slow, uncomfortable, and messy. But that day, when a racist HOA president called the police on a black teen, only to freeze when his father arrived in uniform, that was the catalyst our community needed. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like growth, like communities coming together to do better, like a 15-year-old boy teaching adults what true dignity looks like. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon against prejudice isn't anger or vengeance. It's the simple, undeniable truth that we all deserve to feel safe in the places we call home. I still think about that evening sometimes, when I'm sitting on my front porch with my coffee. I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent, if Captain Thompson hadn't arrived, if Jamal hadn't been so prepared, so composed. Not every story like this has a resolution. Not every black child stopped for existing has a police captain father to intervene. Not every community is willing to confront its biases, but ours did. And while we're far from perfect, we're trying. That counts for something. Jamal starts college next year. He's heading to Stanford on a full academic scholarship. The entire neighborhood threw him a celebration when he got his acceptance letter. Karen baked cookies. Captain Thompson gave a speech that had everyone in tears. And for one perfect afternoon, it felt like we weren't just a collection of houses behind a gate, but an actual community. That's the thing about neighborhoods. They're not just streets and houses, they're people. And people can change, people can learn, people can do better. Even HOA presidents. If you believe in justice and love seeing accountability in action, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, HOA Reckoning. We share real-life stories of injustice that turn into movements. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching.